evening and good to be back with you on News Geelong. You may or may not have picked it up, or a few days ago there was an article in the Australian pertinent to some recommendations by an expert committee on health into the number of standard drinks that should be consumed as a maximum within good health guidelines per day per person, and it might come this might come as a bit of a shock to some to know that the maximum number of drinks that people are advised they should consume on any given day, alcoholic drinks, is 2. Now, I would imagine if you hadn't picked up on that news item before, you would probably respond with something like, well, they'd have to be kidding. But that's the reality of an intensive study that was undertaken by a national health authority over several years. And it's interesting that it's based not on the social implications of alcohol for others, like street violence, road accidents, that sort of thing, domestic violence. It's based on individual health situations for the person that consumes alcohol. Now, it might be thought, well, what chance have you got of that sort of recommendation becoming reality? Interestingly enough, though, we do have a history of being able to turn around a culture of something that's being used a lot and, take another look at it. One of the obvious examples is asbestos, and you don't have to go back all that far, maybe a couple of decades or so, when asbestos was used in many different areas of industry and construction and so on. And of course, these days, not only is it not used, but enormously protective measures are undertaken. For example, if a building is to be demolished, and environmental studies are done and so on to make sure that the people who are engaged in that work are not subject to the dangers of asbestos. It's interesting that if you research a little bit, which I did courtesy of the internet, that the dangers of asbestos were first realised not 20 years ago, but about 2,000 years ago amongst Greek and Roman people who used it. And we've gone on for the best part of 2,000 years before people have said, hey, this is not good enough. We have people dying, we have people whose lives are being affected, we have families being destroyed. We better get rid of this stuff, it's not doing us any good. A similar situation can probably be looked at with tobacco. Watch any of the old movies on TV and you'll see people smoking all the time, and we know just how common it was. The cigarette advertising and so on was quite prolific, and over the past 20 or so years, the amount of, while cigarette smoking is still legal, the health implications of it are widely recognised, and over a period of time have actually made an enormous difference to the number of people who undertake smoking. While it's still a problem with young people, particularly young women, I understand, the overall community attitude to it is far different from what it used to be. Is it possible? Is it possible that the same thing might happen with alcohol? Again, not just looking at the social implications, but the actual health implications. I couldn't begin to tell you the number of people that I have looked after in the sense of undertaken their funeral, when the family members have told me, or I've known beforehand, that in fact it is the illnesses which produced a life-threatening and ultimately terminal situation for them were very, very directly related to alcohol. It's a much more major health hazard than perhaps we are prepared to understand. I think we might know it in our head, but we're not prepared to let it really get to us in the way in which perhaps other things have happened, such as cigarette smoking and asbestos, as I mentioned, just to name just 2. The reality is, though, that we can change a culture. It might seem quite ludicrous to think that we could reduce alcohol intake to the sort of levels recommended by this National Health Expert Committee. But, well, at least it's a start. They've recognised and identified that the impact of alcohol on the human body, particularly when undertaken over these sort of prescribed limits, is going to be significant indeed. Recognising it is one thing, actually acting on it in a widespread social environment is another. But at least the first step has been taken, and maybe, just maybe, we might have a much more healthy society by genuinely looking at the intake of alcohol in our community. We might have a much healthier society into the future. Good to be with you on News Geelong.